Welcome back to another episode of Data Protection Gumbo. I am super excited to have this conversation around hacking the backup system and securing data and cutting costs. All of those are super important things that we are going to tap into the mind of Gabriel Gumbs, who is the Chief Product Officer and President of Myota. Welcome to the Gumbo, Gabe.
Look, I appreciate you having me on. Long time listener, first time participant.
So, give us a brief intro into yourself and how we all got to where we are right now.
Absolutely. Well, I do like to quip that my title is Chief Hacking Officer.
Okay.
So by
All
way
right.
of background, I am indeed the President Chief Product Officer, but by way of background, I've been in information security the better part of my entire adult life. I've spent most of that time as an ethical hacker in various capacities. Sometimes the mission is actual data recovery. And I mean that in the way you might be thinking about it. Get in, retrieve something that belongs to someone else and return it. For a significant part of my career, it's been spent building data security practices and infrastructure and architecture for some large organizations. I worked for a number of years for Pfizer. I focused a lot there on network and application security. Kind of made my way into the startup world and did quite a bit more there in both the application and data security space as well too. So I mean, you can pretty much draw a straight line between where my career has taken me and where I am today. Pretty much to breaking things. Breaking things is kind of my specialty, and so I've translated my knowledge of breaking things to help people, well, protect things to keep them
Mm-hmm.
from breaking.
It all makes sense, right? Breaking,
Yeah.
protecting, hacking, and you sound like an ethical hacker now, right? You're working for the good side, and hopefully you don't still have one foot in the dark web somewhere. Maybe you do. I don't know.
I mean, look, let's be honest. If I did, I'm certainly not going to tell it
You're
on a
not gonna tell,
broadcast.
right?
I'm not going to
Exactly.
tell. But no, you're absolutely right. All ethical, all ethical. Look, going back as far as I can remember, a lot of it for us was fun and games. I spent a lot of my formative years when I was younger in the New York City area. And so for those familiar, I got involved early with groups like the New York Linux User Group and the Alt 2600 groups. And so I've been in and around technology and or the hacking scene in some manner for that entire time. But do I keep it on the ethical side? Always.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And were you the kid with the Commodore 64?
Oh
Did you ever
man,
have one
hell.
of those?
I had one, still have one. It's on a shelf somewhere. I was the kid with the Commodore 64 and a bevy of other just random equipment and parts
Yeah.
strewn across what was then a small New York City apartment.
I think Vic 20 was also one too, right? Am I right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember the VIC 20. So I was just young enough that by the time I got my hands on a VIC 20, they weren't really in much use any longer. That
Mm.
was mostly just me experimenting and playing around at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really good to know we have some synchronicities right there. And also I wanted to dive into just what Gartner describes your solution as, and it describes it as a cyber storage technology. Now, do you feel that this description like really captures what you offer and also what you define as, and maybe if you define it differently than cyber storage technology?
Yeah. Look, I think labels are important, kind of helps people orient themselves as to kind of what it is you do, what it is you offer. And so as labels go, I'm certainly not offended by it. I think it encapsulates and captures one of the important aspects of what we do, namely the prioritization of protecting data at the storage level as
Hmm.
opposed to, say, maybe at the application level, at the identity level, at the network level, but actually protecting data where data resides, where data is used, where data goes through its entire life cycle from creation to sharing to archival and destruction. Those life cycle phases of data all happen at the storage level. And so I'm inclined to agree with Gartner when you look at a solution like Myota's that actively prioritizes protection at that level. I
Hmm.
think it's a pretty fair characterization. I do not think it fully encapsulates all of what Myota does, but that is true of any label, right? There's nothing monolithic about cyber storage, and you'll find that some of them are built differently. The the way that Myota itself was actually originally designed was a byproduct of two things. So my co-founder, he was a postdoctorate student at Princeton working out of their Edge lab, and he was trying to find a way to use data in environments that he didn't have control over,
Hmm.
mostly the cloud. And so when we teamed up, it became an exercise in, well, much like the cloud, let's assume you don't have control from day one. Only in the cloud, you give up that trust of control.
Yeah.
You trust that the folks at AWS are going to do what they're supposed to do. But all things being equal, we've even seen it in those environments where, there's sometimes bad actors on the inside. But what we did was when we teamed up, we took the approach of, well, let's just assume compromise. Let's assume I'm already inside the environment.
Hmm.
Now, how do you protect the data? 26 years of being an ethical hacker, I've never returned a check because I found zero issues in an environment. It's just not a
Hmm.
thing.
Okay.
So let's just start from a place of assumed compromise, which is today pretty much well codified in zero trust
Yeah.
as a
Yeah, it is.
methodology, right? Right. Let's just assume I'm already in. Now, how do you protect the data?
Mm. Maybe immutability is one way, right?
Oh boy, you about to round me up. Immutability.
But I know that
Yeah.
that's kind of a controversial term now because when you say immutability, I have had individuals on the podcast that talk about immutability is not really immutability, and I mean they really go down a rabbit hole. And then I have people talking about sharding the data and erasure coding and air gap, and then they throw in MFA, but that's kind of a little different there. But what's your take on
So you've
how do
yeah,
you stop someone inside already?
you've touched on a number of, features that Myota does indeed have.
Okay.
But as immutability goes, I think the thing that we first have to ask ourselves is what outcome are we trying to get to? You know, from a data management perspective, most folks usually think about immutability in the context of I need the integrity of the data to be what it was when I first stored it. I need to write that thing one time, and I
Hmm.
might need to read it, maybe never, but maybe many times, but it must never be altered. And so I'm willing to agree that, at a very high level, immutability should first and foremost preserve the integrity of the data. But if you are unable to access the data, and this is where the rubber meets the road, is it still immutable? Is it still immutable? There was a
Mm.
talk given this summer at the Black Hat conference, hacker conference out in Vegas every year.
Vegas.
Yeah. It was given by two gentlemen, Ryan Kane and Roshank Shetty. The name of the talk is called Are Your Backups Still Immutable Even If You Can't Access Them? Great talk. And they went through the very many ways they tested the immutability of a lot of solutions in the market. And their findings walked away with the following for the most part. In the best case scenario, most of these solutions were able to stop someone else from altering the data, but you couldn't get access to the data either.
Hmm. Okay.
Is your data still immutable if you can't read the data?
Hmm. If you can't read it.
Right. Like typically we talk about worm, right? We talk about
Yeah,
write
right.
once,
Read many.
read many.
Hmm.
So the read is implicit in what one expects from immutability. But a lot of what we see get thrown around as immutability boils down to little more than an access control, right? Like you have made it such that you can't accidentally delete the thing, or you can't accidentally, some part of the infrastructure crash, etc. But
Hmm.
immutability does nothing for bad guys, right? It's like locks. Locks are really good at keeping honest people out. Locks are really, really bad at keeping dishonest people out. That's how locks work. And
Okay.
immutability, I think, is falling for a similar kind of hive mind, if you would, where everyone's running towards, it's immutable, so that means no one can touch it or break it. If that were the case, then encryption also would have stopped all cybersecurity attacks as well,
Hmm.
right? I encrypt data and now you can't read it.
Yeah.
But but you come along and re-encrypt my data. Well, hell, now I can't read it either. So sure, the confidentiality is protected, but ultimately, if you can't use the data, that write once, the read many, if you can't read it many times or read it at all, is your data still immutable? And I think there's a big fallacy around what immutability is and more importantly, how to protect it. And so I'll leave you with one more analogy.
Mm-hmm.
If you said to the average security person, hey, we use AES 256 encryption,
Yeah.
most people follow up and ask something like, oh, that's awesome. How do you manage the keys? How
Mm-hmm.
do you protect the keys?
Right.
When I ask most folks about their immutability, and they're like, yo, no, totally, I have immutability. And then my follow-up question is, that's awesome. How do you protect the immutability? They're like, what? But it's immutable. No, no, I heard you. So how do you protect the immutability? You
Hmm.
told me
Okay.
that you applied a control, right? No, not too dissimilar from, say, encryption. And so then you want to know how you protect the keys. How do you protect the keys from theoretical attacks? How do you protect the keys from exposure, from loss? How do you rotate them? How do you protect the keys? So when you tell me you have immutability,
Mm-hmm.
my first inclination is to dig a little deeper and go, well, how is that immutability itself protected? Have you protected it from my poisoning the data prior to your writing it once?
Mm-hmm.
Have you protected it administratively for me being able to say simply remove the immutability? I get a lot of mixed answers to that one too. They're like,
Mm.
well, sure,
Okay.
only the root account can do that. Well, that's awesome. But look, as an attacker, I'm coming for root.
I
That's
know, right?
that's
Can I?
that's what
Yeah.
I'm coming for. So telling me that it can only be altered only when I get access to the very level of access I need to perpetrate my naughtiness in the first place
Mm.
kind of leaves me scratching my head going, I think we have to take immutability past that. Why? Immutability purely for the purpose of preserving integrity is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
But we need immutability to take it further than that today. Like we need it to be able to stand on the front lines against attackers. And the way it's currently designed to simply write once, read many times, if you can't also protect the write function and the read function, you don't have immutability. Elaborate access control.
Yeah. What's your solution to that then?
This is difficult. This is where a lot of our patents exist.
Mm-hmm.
What Myota does differently and uniquely is we allow that data to be written once and read many times, but we also preserve every single change to the data. Doesn't matter what the changes or who made the change. We preserve those changes very intentionally because, again, we assume that that change may have been not one that you wanted, not one that you signed off on. Even if you had dual factor change control on it, well, two people must turn the key at the
Yeah.
same time. That's awesome sauce. But look, if those things were the end all be all and nothing is a silver bullet to that, then we wouldn't be hit with 1.7 million ransomware attacks a day. So what
Mm-hmm.
Myota does is we don't just make it so the data itself can never be rewritten. We make it so that all the changes themselves are preserved, almost like a recording device. We
Mm-hmm.
can preserve immutability over time indefinitely through all changes. We actually call it a polymorphic immutability. The
Mm. Okay.
polymorphism
Yeah.
aspect of it speaks to the ability for the data to change, but still always be preserved such that if you want to revert it to any of those changes, you can. Now, there are other things that sound similar, but where a lot of, I would say, the mistakes are made is that they're still just solving for human error and
Okay.
accidental things. They're not really solving for the bad guy aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're solving for is we anticipate that the change will be made maliciously. So separate where the changes are preserved, decentralize that from where the changes are made. Actual separation of trust, not just layering in more trust control.
So to me, this sounds like a kind of a poke at enterprise backup and recovery software. A lot of vendors out there, right? And those are the ones that I really hear talking about immutability and air gap and MFA. And of course, a lot of cybersecurity type companies talk about it as well. But the bad guys go after the backups, right? They've been doing that for maybe a few years now. And we keep hearing stories that, yeah, they got after the backups and they were able to encrypt the backups as well. So, what do you say, or how can you explain if I guess, your platform integrates with existing backup infrastructure? Is that something that Myota does? And also, what are some of the benefits that it brings to existing backup software?
That's correct. So we're not really looking to poke those backup solutions so much.
Okay.
Look, they are necessary. We love them. We partner with them. We're huge fans of pretty much all. In fact, we're rather agnostic to which ones we work with. Our
Hmm.
customers use everything from Veeam to Cohesity to Veritas to Commvault.
Yeah, yeah.
They're all over the map. Those solutions all have to store the data somewhere.
Hmm.
Some of them bring their own storage components with it, which, in my opinion, only further marries them to that inherent trust problem, right? Like there's an inherent trust between the backup solution and where the data lands. And
Yeah.
they kind of almost have to trust each other because, well, you got to put the backup somewhere, right? Like the moving
Hmm.
truck showed up, they picked up your boxes, and it's got to take them to a warehouse somewhere.
On-prem
Where
or
that
in the cloud,
in the cloud.
wherever. Yeah.
We are very much that secure place where you put that data. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to at least paraphrase Rubrik's CEO.
Okay.
Rubrik's an amazing solution.
Bipple.
And he himself said the following during one of their stakeholder meetings. He said that backup and recovery solutions are built for operational recovery, such as human error or natural disasters, not against cyber attacks. He's 100% right. They're not designed for that.
Hmm.
As a security professional, I shed a tear that the thing that is rescuing us out of this security problem is legitimately just, well, let's go down into the basement, let's go pull out copies. The thing that we are using to solve this problem isn't even technology, it's money. We're saying you need to make 3 copies of your data. That's the
Yeah.
answer. The
Right.
answer is spend 3 times as much. Spend 3x as much on how much you store the data, and you will be safe. In that conversation, you haven't done anything different. You're doing the exact same thing, you're just doing it 3x.
Okay.
In pretty much every other business scenario, if you had something that you knew was susceptible to failure, most people would look at that and go, we probably shouldn't triple it.
Hmm.
We probably
Yeah.
should diversify what
Yeah.
we're doing there. We probably shouldn't triple it. And that old 3-2-1 rule dates all the way back to '09, right? Peter
And
Krog.
you heard it 3-2-1-1, right?
I've heard it three, two, one,
The
one, three,
extra
two, one,
one.
1, 0, the extra one, right?
Yeah.
Throw an extra one in there, throw a zero in there. And when I hear that, all I hear is throw an extra decimal point in there. That's what I hear. I hear throw some more
Hmm.
cash at it. Throw a little more cash at it.
Make it
We're
rain.
Make it rain. Make it rain. What we're doing differently is we are severing that trust between where the backup solutions exist and provide their value and where the data then gets protected, such that Veeam can hand its data off to a Myota. And even
Hmm.
if you were to compromise, say, the Veeam platform, right? Not picking on them, just random one. Maybe it's Rubrik, doesn't matter, Dell. But you
Hmm.
compromise that console, you get a certain level of inherent trust directly to the storage environment. You are directly trusted in the storage environment as part of that backup platform.
Right.
Myota's breaking that trust so that if a bad guy like me does get access to that, they can't do anything with it. What we've known is that since NotPetya hit, that's one of the
Hmm.
the larger
Yeah. Yeah.
ransomware events, right? Since NotPetya, tactics have changed. They are going after the backups first because they've
Hmm.
learned if I can cripple your ability to come online, you're going to pay me. So we see, and this comes from Veeam's research, 93% of all of the successful ransomware attacks, they're hitting the backups too. 93%. They're
Yeah.
hitting the backups also. So if as an industry, we're spending, I lost count, but let's just round it off to $10 billion worth of cash on backup solutions, and 93% of attacks are still successfully hitting the backups, something's happening. And it's not that backup
Hmm.
solutions are failing to do their job. They're doing their job. They backed up the data. They did their
Yeah.
job.
So
They
are
did their
you
job.
are you working with the backup players or are you a different
We are
solution?
we are indeed working with the
Okay.
backup players. Yeah. So for example, again, just to keep pulling on that same thread, we are,
Yeah.
for example, a Veeam ready, Veeam certified solution,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
As I mentioned before, too, we have customers that are very heavily invested in things like Commvault. We've got some customers that are using Cohesity,
Yeah.
right? Myota itself is simply either file storage or object storage, operates
Hmm.
on premises, in the cloud, hybrid. We're super agnostic. We're not really interested in where you want to store your data, who you want to store it with, what you want to use to back it up, what you don't want to use. We're interested in solving the security problem. The
Hmm.
bad guys are in problem. They're going to ensure that you can't recover your data.
Yeah.
They're going to ensure that they disrupt your immutability. Average dwell time for an attacker, 60 days. That's a lot of days for me to poison data. I don't care how immutable it is. That's a lot of time for me to write it once. And when you come to read it, it's not going to be what you're looking for.
And I was also going to ask you as well. This is a great conversation. I could talk about this stuff all day long. So you already answered the question about positioning your solution alongside as a partnership with the existing backup players out there. So is there any artificial intelligence that you're using on the back end, any machine learning and all of that in order to kind of help do what you do?
There is some. It's applied in different ways. I will tell you that
Or you
the
can't give that
most
away. It's the secret. It's the secret sauce.
no, no, it's not the secret. It's not the secret sauce. I think what it is it's overused and overapplied in some
Okay.
scenarios, right? And so we are attempting to do three things: making the data 100% secure, making it 100% recoverable, and lowering the costs associated with doing that. So literally taking your three copies and cutting it down to 1.5 copies. So you're literally going to reduce your storage costs by 50%. We do use some intelligence to perform all three of those things, but
Hmm.
it isn't the first and front line and the mainstay of what we do. It's all woven together with some other very, very interesting technology that I think don't get all of the bell of the ball treatment that AI does. We use a zero knowledge encryption. So
Hmm.
it's completely quantum resilient. How is it quantum resilient? Short answer, I don't leave
Yeah.
enough data around that you can put it back together. I make it such that there's not enough information that the NSA could walk in, and I'm not exaggerating, they can't put it back together because there
Yeah.
simply is not enough information there to do it. AI and intelligence is very much part of the platform, especially on some of the detection mechanisms and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But ultimately, what we're doing is we are marrying confidentiality, integrity, and availability protection in a way
Hmm.
that no one else is. I would very, very seriously argue that what you see in the rest of the backup world is a concentration on either integrity or availability, and to a lesser extent, confidentiality, but
Mm.
no true marriage of those three things, such that as an attacker, I can't isolate one and still put you out of business.
Great insights here. And Gabe, I do appreciate it. And I don't know if we have time for one more question or not, but I do want to give you an opportunity to give the Gumbo listeners some details about where they can go in order to access your software. If you have a free demo or free software, give it to the Gumbo listeners right now because I'm sure they're going to
Absolutely.
be hitting me up. How can they get their hands on this, right?
Absolutely. So head on over to myota.io. We do have available a free trial. We are just also launched a self-service version of that. So you can come sign up, get direct access yourself. It is as easy as signing up for any other object storage platform. So if you're familiar with using anything from S3 to Backblaze, etc., it's just object storage. It just
Azure?
happens to be Azure, absolutely. If you wanted to run on over to some of the marketplaces like the AWS Marketplace and find us there, you find us there too. But head over to the website, myota.io. Go
Hmm.
ahead and check it out. Hit the knowledge base if you're like me and you really want to geek out first in understanding how things work. Go ahead and check out the blog where I wrote a piece on the magical myth of immutability that I think is really worth a read.
Okay.
I walked the readers through. It's not opinion as to why those things are not capable of defending against an attacker. It's kind of right there on the surface. But head over to myota.io. And yeah, if you mention that you heard about us on this episode of Gumbo, there's a little something extra in it for you as well.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that, Gabe. And thank you so much for all of this great information. I do want to let the audience know, Gumbo listeners know, that please check us out on YouTube. I'm a little late to the game, but we are on YouTube right now. So if you find us there, hit that thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe, send it over to your friends as well. And check out the Backup and Recovery Professionals LinkedIn group. And there's over 26,000 like-minded individuals in that group as well. And we're having similar conversations to the ones that we're having right here. So, Gabe, once again, I appreciate you being on the show here. And we'll have to get you back another time, maybe in the new year. to continue this conversation.
Absolutely. We've got some real exciting stuff on the horizon, extremely exciting stuff. I appreciate you
I'm
having
sure.
me. Platform for us to have this conversation. Love the show. I'm definitely going to go check you out on YouTube as well and smash that like button myself
Okay,
and
absolutely.
subscribe too. So thanks for having me on the show.